Oh, welcome everyone. A few years ago, I was treating a patient who was actually enrolled in our clinical trial here at my office at Sulsari. And she was doing all right, but she wasn't really fully invested. And she also had significant cognitive decline. So Laura Lynn was getting kind of moderate results, a little bit better, but her husband wasn't fully on board. So they hadn't fully done the ketogenic diet. And although she'd always been active, she wasn't really doing anything different in terms of her activities day to day. She was taking the supplements, but she wasn't really fully on board. Then her granddaughter moved in. Her entire daughter's family actually moved in. They had been living overseas and they moved in with Laura Lynn, and they changed everything when they did because that granddaughter was in nursing school and she was learning all about health and was particularly interested in her grandmother's dementia and what she could do from a health perspective to help her. So she started coming to her visits and she took some of our advice she heeded some of our advice and they started doing it together. Her grandmother, so Laura Lynn and her granddaughter started going for walks. And on those walks, her granddaughter would quiz her about important dates in their families, the birthdays of her grandchildren, anniversaries, anything that Laura Lynn was really excited about and invested in. And as she got better, they would start talking about the names of the different trees and the names of the different neighbors that lived in each house. And we could see that Laura Lynn started to progress. And in fact, her scores got better. So we measure cognitive function based on a MoCA score, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And what we saw was that she started with a 17. And then by about 3 months, when she wasn't really fully invested, she was in an 18. After her granddaughter had moved in with her and started doing these dual task exercises that I'm going to talk about tonight, her MoCA score went up to a 21. Much better. She was more engaged in conversation. She wasn't forgetting her words. She was able to find words fluently in conversation. She wasn't repeating herself. And she felt like she was part of the family again. Her husband saw what a big difference this made, and he was more committed. So they finally started to get into ketosis, and sure enough, her MoCA score got even higher. A MoCA score, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, is out of 30. It's a one-page worksheet that many of you have probably seen. You draw a clock and you identify some zoo animals. You identify where you are, what building you're in, what day of the week it is, and such. And this score is a perfect score is 30. She had a score that was kind of in that middle range where we start to wonder if we can help someone. We're not as confident if someone starts to dip into the low teens. We really want to pull them out of this earlier. And so sure enough, when we got everybody involved, there were a few big learnings in this. One, the power of dual task exercises, but two, the power of having a team on board, of having your partners, your care partners, as well as your spouse, whoever's on your team, having them all invested in doing this with you. It was really an amazing thing to see Laura Lynn transform and to celebrate her success with her. And I want that for you. So if you are here because you are in Laura Lynn's shoes and you're starting to notice cognitive decline, maybe even you know your MoCA score today and you know it's not perfect, it's not a 30, it's not even a 26 or above, that's our normal stage, but you're starting to dip. If you are noticing that your brain doesn't work the way it did 10 years ago, or if someone's mentioned that you're repeating questions or they already told you that, or if you care about someone and you notice that their memory is slipping, or if you are a healthcare practitioner and you're wanting to learn more, you're in the right place. Tonight, we're going to talk about one facet of the Bredesen approach. So what the Bredesen approach encompasses is many things, and we're going to talk tonight about activities. So the activities component, last week we talked about the ketogenic diet, another very important component, but I want to share in this setting about things that you can do starting today, starting immediately, where you don't have to see a doctor. It doesn't have anything to do with medical treatment. It's just about diet, environment, and activities is what we're going to focus on tonight. But there's so much of the Bredesen protocol that you can do from home. You can get movement and exercise and manage stressors and create more connection and have more creativity in your life without ever needing to see a doctor. And a lot of people get benefit from just making those types of changes. So hopefully if you were here last week, you're excited about the ketogenic diet and maybe you've even started to try it. Now, if you have struggled, then you're not alone. We've seen that many people struggle to make these changes. And sometimes what's missing is community. And so I'm also going to share a bit more about an opportunity to join our community tonight. We have a 12-week coaching course that's coming up. It's starting next week, where you can have access to me. We do 12 weeks of coaching with me in a group setting, but there's accountability and accessibility and inspiration. I saw that somebody who's here tonight is looking for that inspiration. There's community and there's support. You're surrounded by other people who are committed to doing this and committed to this Bredesen approach, committed to learning more, and they're not willing to take what the neurologist said at heart, at face value, and say there's like, accept that there's nothing you can do. This is really about taking charge of your own health and making that last phase of life, that elderly phase of life, the best phase yet. And so if you're looking for more support, stick with us, and I'm going to share more about how you can take advantage of that opportunity. But there's a lot to think about. And so we're going to go through activities tonight and what you can kind of think through. And we're going to brainstorm together about how to get activities to be part of your overall Bredesen program and what you can do at home. So one of the reasons I'm really confident in this approach is because we did a clinical trial. I mentioned that Laura Lynn was in our clinical trial, the woman I was speaking about who went on walks with her granddaughter and got her MoCA score improved so significantly. So we did a clinical trial here in my office from 2020 until 2022. We were collecting data on 23 participants where we did a 6-month intensive intervention. And that meant all of the medical care and all of the lifestyle pieces. And what we saw was that after 6 months, 17 of those people, so the majority of them, 74%, had improved their MoCA scores. And we saw statistically significant increases in the measurements of memory and cognition. This was really exciting because so many people are told that there's nothing you can do if you are on the decline towards Alzheimer's. And I'm here to tell you there is so much you can do to reverse cognitive decline and optimize cognitive function at any stage of life. The issue is that it doesn't work if you don't do it. And many people struggle to change their lifestyle, to change their habits at any age, at any stage, let alone when you're starting to struggle with cognitive decline. So we're here to help. And that's why we've put together this webinar series and also the coaching program. So let's dive into it. So what we want to think about as we think through how we spend our days, is, are you getting meaning? Tyler, let me know if my slides are being weird, please. Tyler's here and she is my right arm and very helpful. And so Tyler, please let me know if there's something up with my slides. But what we want to think through, and you can take a picture of this, but every day we want meaningful connection. Social isolation is one of the known risk factors when it comes to cognitive decline. We want to have time outside, time in nature. We know that getting sunlight helps to support our circadian rhythm so that we get better sleep at night. We know that vitamin D, which we get only from sun exposure or supplements, is really helpful for our brain, that people with dementia have lowered vitamin D levels. We want good physical activity, and we're going to talk through the types of physical activity that are crucial to brain health. We want brain stimulation in our activities throughout the day. We don't want to be sitting in front of the TV just zoning out. We really want to be engaged. That if you don't use it, you lose it at this stage. So we want to do as much as we can to stay engaged with whatever activities we're doing. Do things that we're passionate about, find meaning and purpose in. And then we want to be creative. Creativity helps us make new connections and helps with that neuroplasticity. So we can put all the supplements and all the hormones and everything we want in the system. But then if we don't engage the brain, we don't really get that transformation that we're looking for. So it takes some work, but we're going to talk through different ways to do this. So I hope that right now, and please add to the chat, tell us what comes up for you. What are you already doing? What have you maybe already thought about doing that might check a few of these boxes, that might add more connection, more meaningful connection, maybe with family, maybe with a pet, maybe with friends. What could you do to get more time outside or more physical activity? What about brain stimulation? Have you thought about playing music or starting to play a new game? Maybe putting some of these pieces together. Could you place a new sport? Pickleball is very, very popular right now. It's physical activity. You play as a team or with other people, so you get meaningful connection. It's often played outside. And because it's new, it's very stimulating, and getting strategic can make it creative. But there's lots of creative things that you can do. So I want to share a little bit about what we do at Morama, which I think of as sort of the ideal, because we created Morama. It's a residential care facility for the elderly here in San Diego. And at Morama, we essentially have designed a day where everything you do, from waking up to going to bed and even through the night, we have created an environment and activities and things to do throughout the day, and a diet that it optimizes cognitive function. So we've taken all the hard work out of it. But after creating Morama, we are hearing from so many people that there was not a way for them to get to Morama, right? They didn't want to move their family member across the country, or it wasn't financially feasible. And so that's why we created Morama at Home, the coaching course. And so this is a sample of what we do at Morama in the Clear Mind Center in Kansas, our sister facility. So at 8 o'clock, we have breakfast. It's an organic ketogenic breakfast. And then we go for a walk. So thinking about activities, a walk is a great place to start. If you haven't walked out to the mailbox or gone for a walk lately, it's quite enjoyable. And that's a wonderful place to get started getting movement. The Kirtan Kriya meditation, I'm going to share a little bit more about. And that is a great way to stimulate neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, so the creation of neurons, or the building blocks of our brain, and also those synapses are the connections between our brain. When they looked at Einstein's brain after he passed away, when they did the autopsy, they were expecting him to have a bigger brain than most people. He actually had a normal sized brain with more connections between the neurons. So we want to stimulate those connections, and meditation can help us do that. Meditation, this particular meditation has a lot of research around it that I'll share as we go through the presentation. We do daily chronicles, which includes writing, handwriting, not typing, but actually writing with your hands can help us to remember things. Seeing something later on in your own handwriting can help to trigger memories. And then we use something called the Daily Chronicles, which stimulates memories about certain days of the year in history, and people start to share their wedding day or their mother's birthdays or different celebrations or meaningful events that happen for them. After we have an organic ketogenic snack, we go into some sort of creative activity. Sometimes it's gardening, sometimes it's puzzles, sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's some sort of crafting or music, or we have at Morama, we do cooking classes regularly. Our wonderful chef Gil there gets really creative, and he has each resident choose the menu for the day regularly. And so they get to get really involved in what they're going to eat, and also get excited about creating it together and building the skills in the kitchen, which is a very creative, very sensory experience, right? You taste it, you smell it, you see it, you hear it. So it's a really great, you touch it, of course. It's a really phenomenal way to engage the senses and the motor neurons at the same time as our cognitive neurons. And then after lunch, after that yummy organic ketogenic lunch, we usually go back to whatever that creative activity was, and then have a light snack before getting into more ambitious exercise in our therapy circuit. And again, I'm going to share more about what we do in that therapy circuit in this activities webinar. After dinner, an organic ketogenic dinner, we go into games. This is a really easy time to kick back and relax and watch TV. And I suggest that if you are optimizing your day for cognitive performance, you want to skip TV watching, because you really kind of just check out, right? It doesn't involve any cognitive exercise. You're just passively watching. And so it's best if you can stay engaged or connected to other people by playing games, or maybe singing, listening to music, or playing music. This is a great time to wind down, get away from screens and the blue light that can interfere with sleep, and start to head towards bed. Really set yourself up to get the most out of your sleep, because it is so critical to brain health and healing. A patient of mine had pretty severe dementia. She had a MoCA score below 10, which means that she was having trouble communicating with her husband. Her husband was very committed to getting her the best care possible. So when he brought her in, I was asking about her sleep and how if she had sleep apnea, which is really important to treat. And he was like, no, she sleeps really well, except sometimes she has trouble falling asleep. So then I asked about their sleep hygiene. How do you get in, like, what are the activities that you do leading up to going to bed? And sure enough, they were watching the news and kind of what I would have considered stressful shows before bed. They were watching something called Succession, and I don't know if any of you had seen that, but apparently it's quite dramatic, and the people in it are not the best people in the world. They're not starting their days with loving kindness meditations. They all seem like villains from what I understood. And so she was watching the news, and someone with cognitive decline, every human, when you see war, when you see fighting or violence or hear about something awful going on in the world, you don't know, your brain doesn't know the difference between that happening to you and that happening across the world. And so it stimulates the stress hormones. And especially if somebody has cognitive decline, it's very hard for them to make sense of that. We can rationalize like, oh, that war is far away. It's not here in our neighborhood. However, someone with cognitive decline might go to sleep with confusion around that and the stress that would impact their ability to get good quality deep sleep that's so healing and so crucial to recovering from cognitive decline. So thinking about those activities before bed is really, really important to optimizing cognitive function. Other things to think about as we consider these some ideas, I guess, as we consider these activities. Music, there are people, I help and support people on the whole spectrum of the cognitive decline spectrum, the whole spectrum of cognitive decline, excuse me. And there's people who are looking to optimize, and there's people who have a MoCA scores of 0 who are barely verbal. And what's fun to see is that music and rhythm are one of those things that we keep longest. It's one of the last things to go as people go down the depressing decline of dementia that we're trying to prevent and avoid. But sometimes when I see people, they're in that stage already. And we find that if we play popular music from when they were younger, something like Jingle Bells, they often will know the words and they'll be able to sing along. So playing familiar music, especially things that you can sing to, even childhood nursery rhymes and childhood songs, those are very familiar and ingrained, and people even with severe cognitive decline can sing along. So that's a thing to think about on the music spectrum. Now, at the very other end of the spectrum, you could learn to play a new instrument and new songs on that instrument. If you're somebody who's starting to suffer with some cognitive decline, you might go back to a familiar instrument, but play a new song. If you're further down the spectrum of cognitive decline, you're further progressed, you might go back to a familiar instrument and play a familiar song. As you potentially, or your loved one is declining or is further declined, you can sing along. It doesn't have to be the most familiar song, but singing is a great way to stimulate the vagal system, which is part of the craniosacral system, or that parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal state. And so if we want to stimulate that, sometimes humming or singing to a song that you enjoy can be a great way to bring music into your cognitive optimization activities throughout the day. So if you like listening to music, playing music, learning music, singing along, there's a way to make music part of your brain healing activities, no matter where you are on that stage. And that's true for crafting. We use the example of a birdhouse. If you don't have any cognitive decline, you might think about building the exact replica of your own home and going to the hardware store and picking out the wood and sawing it and putting the hardware in there, painting it, putting it out for the birds, and then identifying all the birds that come and using the different seeds to attract different birds. You can get really elaborate. Or one thing that we've done at Morama for people who are further progressed is we just take a pine cone and put peanut butter on it and hang it outside the window and watch the birds come. There's a big spectrum of how involved some of these crafts can get. And so think about one of the most important things when we think through this list of music, crafts, maybe cooking and food, spiritual activities like meditation or prayer practices or Bible study, games and outings. What is fun? Fun is so crucially important here because it's going to make us come back for more. If we enjoy what we're doing, we're going to continue doing it. If it feels like work, it's going to be harder to do regularly and get that great positive impact. So again, add to the chat, what would be fun? Does this inspire you in any way? What would be something that you would be excited to do somewhere in the spectrum, and be as detailed as you can? What would it be like if you were to take on one of these things and start adding them regularly, either weekly or daily, to your routine? What would it look like? Tonight, we're brainstorming about the ideal. And as we do that, the ideal is like the horizon. I do not expect you to arrive there, but we want to be going in that direction. And whenever you measure yourself, don't measure yourself from your distance from the horizon because it's always going to be far away. But look backwards. Where have I come from? So have I been able to add some sort of creative activity into my daily life? I would love to be able to ask you that question in 12 weeks and for you to say, yes, I have started playing music again. And I'm even going to see a music teacher once a week, and I'm learning to play piano again. And I have a recital coming up. That would be so phenomenal. Or I've signed up, somebody mentioned sculpting. I signed up for a ceramics class and I'm going twice a week, and I have a plan to make a statue of an owl or a set of coffee cups. Whatever it is for you, let us know. What is your plan? What could you get excited about? What would be fun and exciting and engaging? And then is it possible you could check a few of those boxes? Could you feel like you are getting, in whatever you think about doing, more meaningful connection, more time outside potentially, more physical activity, more brain stimulation, and more creativity? What would that look like for you? A sculpting class, I love that. Playing bananagrams with your cousin Carolyn, I love it. And so Carolyn, my mom, thank you. Hi, Terry. Good to see that you're here. My mom actually plays bananagrams by herself, which you don't have to have someone. I don't want that to hold anyone back. And then Elizabeth mentioned it's really hard when the person you're caring for says no to everything. That's one of the things that we go over in the course, is how to communicate with your loved one. Teepa Snow is a great, I don't typically encourage going down the YouTube rabbit hole, but Teepa Snow is worth doing that for, because she has so many practical tips about how to communicate with your loved one. It's really hard because we have to relearn how to communicate. And it's not usually if someone is saying no or they don't feel motivated. Of course, everyone needs rest and sometimes they might be tired, but typically it's the way that we are communicating. And if we can get creative about that, find their unmet need, and communicate in a way that feels good for them, oftentimes we can change the outcomes. So there is wonderful support out there. Okay, so I hope that anyone, her name is Teepa Snow, and Tyler can put that into the chat. So I want to shift to physical activity. Oh, and of course, there are elements of physical activity that can feel creative and can feel, sorry, I'm jumping around here, sharing my slides. Oops. Here we go. So we can make physical activity creative, and we can do a lot of these things at the same time, because many times as we start to talk about that, right, we're talking about the ideal and this Morama, the day at Morama. And that's hard for most of us to do, particularly if you're still working and if you've got kids around or other people that you're caring for. this can feel like an absolutely more than full-time job. And yet we can make this less time intensive by combining things, by getting physical activity at the same time that we get that meaningful connection, at the same time that we get that time outside. Even if it's cold, bundle up and get out there. It's so good for you. So exercise, it's a similar concept. You can get aerobic exercise at the same time that you get strength training, at the same time that you do dual task, at the same time that you do contrast. So most people are familiar. I'm going to go through each of these four. Most people are familiar with aerobic exercise and strength training. Aerobic exercise is when you get your heart rate up, and you want to regularly do that. The literature is completely clear. So the exercise, if you could put this in a pill, we wouldn't have chronic disease. And yet it's hard for us to do. And that's part of why we have the class, is to motivate everyone and to be your cheerleader and to be your accountability buddy. But getting some sort of vigorous exercise, about 150 to 300 minutes a week is what's out there, but so call it 200 minutes a week. This is about 4 to 5 days of about an hour. You can break it down in lots of different ways, whatever works for you, but you want to be getting regular exercise. That means more days than not. And you can, again, break it up into strength and aerobic, or you can do them at the same time. So aerobic means you're getting your heart rate up. This is cardio exercise. And we typically think of running, jogging, maybe fast walking, swimming, biking. That kind of thing is going to get your heart rate up. You're moving and you're moving fast. But you can also do strength training exercise or building muscle in a HIIT form, in the high intensity interval training, and that will also get your heart rate up. Many people have heard of curves or other kind of circuit, Orange Theory, other circuit courses like that, where you're doing some strength training pretty quickly. Also, something like yoga can be both aerobic. If you're doing a hatha yoga class where you're doing lots of vinyasas, it can be aerobic and strength training because you're doing things like push-ups and squats during that. And if you have an instructor, you're being cued by that instructor, and that makes it a cognitive exercise. So I want to go into these dual task exercises and talk about what that is. There's a lot of research, and we feel really, really grateful right now. One of the things I'm most excited about professionally is that we are joining forces and collaborating. We're actually getting the benefit of the Pacific Neuroscience Institute and all of the amazing research they have done on dual task exercises, the combination of cognitive and physical exercise at the same time. When you do these things together, you get more benefit. So when you use those motor skills at the same time that you're using those cognitive skills, you get more benefit cognitively than if you do one or the other separately. So the simplest example of this is walking and talking. And there are lots of ways to gamify this. So maybe some of you remember having the Nintendo Wii or did the Dance Dance Revolution. There are kind of games that help with this, but it can be very, very simple, just like the story I told you from Laurelyn at the beginning. You going for a walk and doing something cognitively engaging. This might mean listening to a podcast. You want to be careful if you're listening to something like a podcast or a book and expecting that to be cognitively engaging. You might want to pause it and go back and say, what I just learned from this podcast was, you want to make sure that it sinks in while you're walking. Again, Einstein, his brain with all those connections, the stories are that he would pace up and down the halls. He would be walking while he was thinking about some of his biggest problems. And so we want to engage that as well. There are tons and tons of ways to do this. Astra to ask, is Tai Chi dual task? It is, especially when you're being taught. So Tai Chi is fantastic for cognition, and there's a lot of cross-body movement, which helps with the hemispheres, and so the corpus callosum. And so that can be a really, really great way, especially when you're learning it. Now, it feels like old hat, right? I've been going to Pilates classes for years, and I know exactly what the instructor is going to say next. But other people who are newer to it, and certainly when I was new to it, I had to be really, really cognitively engaged to know what to do next based on the cues. So it depends where you are. Another thing is ballroom dancing. And that's part of why on the slide I had a hula dancer. So any sort of dancing. This is going to engage in so many ways. You've got to remember the music and remember the steps. You need to be aware of your partner. You're physically engaged. You're hearing that rhythm. You're socially engaged. This is a phenomenal exercise. And for decades, we've known that this is beneficial for the brain and protective against dementia. So I want to know from you guys, what are some of the, oh, I love this. Kathy, great, thanks. I want to hear in the chat, please put in the chat, what does this make you think of when we talk about dual task exercises? What are you brainstorming about right now? What could you get excited about doing? What would be fun so that you continue doing it? Another thing we know is that we remember things that we're emotionally attached to. That's part of why I had Laura Lynn start with remembering the dates of that her kids were born, or the birth dates of her kids and grandkids, and anniversaries of when her kids got married, when she got married. She's emotionally engaged in those things. Now, her neighbors are also something she's emotionally engaged in. She's a very social person and she loves them. So remembering who lives in what house was emotionally engaging. Sometimes when we talk to people, they're like, oh, we do math problems. I'm like, how fun is that really? Is that really what you want to do? Is there anything else? So Kathy, I love this, like saying the alphabet backwards, starting with 100 and subtracting by 7. You're studying for the MOCA test there. But Kathy, I'm curious, what would be maybe even a little bit more fun for you? Do you like birds? Would you want to identify the birds, or would you want to identify the trees when you're walking? What could be even more fun to do? And dancing, I think a lot of people agree. I can see here that dancing is really fun. And playing charades, I love that. It's got to be a pretty physical game of charades. Bouncing on the trampoline, I love rebounders because those are helpful for detoxification. It's good aerobic exercise. It's helpful for balance. It's helpful for a lot of things. And so maybe listening to something while you're doing that and learning something new. Guy, pickleball, I think is a really, really, really great idea. Roberta, observing the plants and birds. I love that. Now, thinking about identifying them, can I identify the bird based on the call on their sound? Or can I identify the birds based on what trees they're in? Or can I identify the names of the trees? Can I then learn them in Latin? Making ourselves or challenging ourselves to learn something new and kind of take it to the next level it needs to be challenging. So this is one of the pieces, is people always ask me, okay, what is dual task exercise? It's different for everyone. So you want to be at that edge, you want to be pushing that edge. So like Sean saying golf, if you've never golfed before and you're going to walk from hole to hole to hole and carry your bag, I love that idea. But if you've been golfing for a long time and it's not new for you and you're in the cart, that might not be very physically engaging. And so you want to be at the edge of your physical capacity. You don't need to be, it doesn't need to be a marathon pace. You want to be able to talk while you're doing it, but you don't want to be walking a slow stroll through the park, or like you take your little dog out for a walk and they just stop to sniff everything and pee. That is not going to be physically enough. So, but if you've been sedentary for a long time and you haven't even been walking to the mailbox, maybe that is enough to start. So walking and talking is typically where we start, but then we want to up level. We want to stay at our cognitive edge. And this is why I had Laura Lynn switch from birthdays and anniversaries in the family to identifying plants and identifying neighbors. It was more challenging and she needed more challenge as she got better. So I love these ideas, and this is a really fun creative process. Even this, we're getting our creativity going. It's like bicep curls for our brain, but continue to think about it and think about what would be fun. So here are some other ideas. Sorry, I still am having technical difficulties with Zoom and PowerPoint, so I apologize. Here's just a few fun photos from Morama. where we have lots of exercise going on, walking. We do some chair yoga, chair stretching. We've got a rower. You can see behind her on the rower here is that mini trampoline that somebody mentioned they have. And just community, right? Going out for a walk with your friends. It makes it so much more enjoyable, so much more fun. This is Jody. She's our yoga instructor. She's quite funny, so it's really enjoyable. Everyone looks forward to it and everyone wants to perform for her. We find that sometimes if physical therapy can be covered, or OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy can be covered by insurance. And often we'll see that if you have a care partner that's not performing for you, all of a sudden you get someone in who's maybe young and fit and funny, and they are on their feet and ready to go. And they are performing for that person that's showing up, and it's doing them good. So that's something to consider if you have a care partner or someone you're caring for who keeps saying no to everything. Think about how it might be fun for them. What have they enjoyed in the past? What would they look forward to? And I want to share, so we mentioned there were 4 types of exercise. There is the aerobic exercise, strength training, dual task exercise, which we just talked about, which has incredible research behind it for activities of daily living and mood, increasing mood as well. And this is beneficial for people who are care partners who have mild cognitive impairment and who have full-blown dementia. So this is something to think about doing at any stage. And then contrast oxygen therapy. Does anybody know what that is? Has anybody heard of that already? Is this old news? Maybe you've been here with me for another webinar. I want to share about this because it's one of the things. Oh, yay, DZ's familiar with LiveO2. Yes. So this is one of those things that I learned about later after I had done my training, and I was just blown away by how much better people would get. You have 2 options with the device that we use. There's exercising with oxygen therapy, or EWOT, and then contrast oxygen therapy is another way to do it. And this picture here shows the reservoir of oxygen. So what happens is you can barely see it in this picture here, but there's a concentrator, an oxygen concentrator there. And it fills the reservoir with that concentrated oxygen at 80%. We breathe 20% oxygen when we're breathing air day to day, if we're at sea level. And what you can do if you're doing oxygen contrast is you can toggle using this little device right here, back and forth between that 80% and 8%. So we breathe 20%, so you have positive oxygen at 80 and negative oxygen at 8%. And using this mask, and there's this elephant trunk that goes to the reservoir, that makes it so that you're only breathing that 80% or the 8% while you're exercising. So what's going on here? Well, with contrast oxygen therapy, you're exercising, so you're getting that movement, you've got blood circulating, and when you restrict oxygen on the negative O2, you get vasodilation, so your blood vessels get bigger. And then when you flip the switch to positive oxygen, that 80% oxygen, you get a diffusion of more oxygen in the system. So this is called the hormetic effect. The concept here is that you stress the system by reducing the oxygen availability, and then you give it more oxygen, you get that contrast. And by stressing the system over time, you get more resilience. So you kind of burn off senescent cells, or those old cells that aren't optimally functioning. And then you stimulate the production of new cells with more mitochondrial density, the ability to create more energy that we need for our brain. So this can be extremely effective if you're willing to do it. When I first opened Morama, we were first opening the residential care facility in December of 2019, we announced that we were doing it. And there was a couple that called from Oregon, and they weren't going to be able to move to Morama, but she was absolutely desperate. She had an autoimmune condition and was very dependent on her husband for day-to-day cooking and cleaning and maintaining the household. And she was noticing his cognitive decline. They didn't have any adult children, and she was feeling very, very worried that she was going to become dependent on somebody who was going to need dependence himself. He was going to be dependent on someone else, and they didn't have anyone to rely on. So she asked me, if you could do one thing to improve cognition, what would it be? And I said, give me 2, the ketogenic diet and LiveO2, the contrast oxygen therapy. They never went into ketosis. All they did was LiveO2. And 3 months later, and it was like in April or May of 2020, like right at the height of the pandemic, she sent me this wonderful note that said how much better he had gotten. And that was the only thing that he did. But they were all in. They did it 5 days a week for at least 20 minutes. And he did the contrast oxygen therapy aggressively. And sure enough, his cognition improved significantly. She also eventually added in music therapy that she found that they both found very, very beneficial. So we saw that and I've seen that multiple times where people use this as a single intervention, or they add this after having done other things for years, and there is a dramatic shift. So contrast oxygen therapy can be very, very effective, I think, in cleaning out some of those cells that aren't doing as well, and then also adding the stimulation to produce good, high quality, good new cells and high mitochondrial density, so you can create that that energy that the brain needs to heal. Contrast O2 can definitely be set up at home. And Tyler put the LiveO2 link in the chat here. And Aurora has a great question about hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So there has been some really good studies out of Israel, and they have a chamber in Florida where they have seen good results with hyperbaric therapy. So hyperbarics, you're getting into a chamber and you're basically using pressure to push oxygen into the system, but it's very passive. So you don't get near the benefit that you do if you are exercising with oxygen. And if you don't like the idea of contrast, you can just exercise with oxygen. That's the EWOT therapy, EWOT, exercising with oxygen therapy. And what we find is that people who are new to exercise, who haven't done it for a while, that's a great way to get them feeling confident, because you don't have the soreness, you don't get that lactic acid buildup after exercising with oxygen the way that you would if you didn't, and you have more stamina right out of the gate. So it's a great way for people to feel like they can do this, they can enjoy exercise, right? Because fun is so crucial to continuing these habits, making them part of your plan. And so hyperbaric oxygen therapy, typically you have to go somewhere, and you can get hyperbaric chambers. In LiveO2, all in, you're going to spend less than $5,000. A hyperbaric chamber, usually they start at $30,000. And the ones that they did the studies on that were so positive in Florida and Israel, those are $5 million chambers. These are hard chambers, big hard chambers. They go down to like 4 ATMs. This, if you're scuba diving, if you've ever been scuba diving, this will make more sense. But you're basically creating pressure like you would underwater. So it's the equivalent of being at 40 feet underwater. If you're in a hard chamber. When you're in one of the more accessible soft chambers that they tend to have in detox centers or chiropractic offices and stuff, you're only getting to about 1 ATM, about 10 feet underwater. So it's not the same pressure. And if you're not active, if you're not exercising while you're in there, usually people take a nap or maybe read a book or watch a movie. If you're just lying there, you're not going to get as much benefit because you're not getting the circulation to deliver the oxygen. So we tend to think of hyperbarics, 1 hour in the hyperbaric chamber is equivalent, or excuse me, 30, so you need 30 sessions in a hyperbaric chamber to be equivalent to like 20 or 30 minutes on a LiveO2 session. So very different. LiveO2 can definitely be set up at home. So I feel like it's a very underutilized therapy, the LiveO2. It has been really profoundly beneficial for many of my patients. And I think that if more people had access, we could see profound changes in health. It requires work. And you don't need to do that, right? Like dual task exercises are totally free. You just have to get creative. LiveO2 is something, if you have the resources or if there's one near you that you can go try, if you're committed to using it regularly, it's one of these things that I want everyone to know about as an option. Before you listen to a neurologist that says there's nothing that you can do for cognitive decline, there is so much you can do. And this is one of the many, many things on that list, right? So don't get overwhelmed if you feel like you don't have access to that. So Elizabeth, great question. Is this good for a 76-year-old lady? Exercise is good for everyone. And LiveO2, we've seen people do it at many, like across the spectrum of ages. And we find that it can be very, very helpful. You want to work up to it, especially the negative O2. So take your time and then and get some support, get some help. I want to answer questions, but I want to share a little bit more about our program, our course. And so if you feel overwhelmed at all, please know that that is very normal. Many people, we hear this over and over again, they have heard about the Bredesen protocol and they're excited about it, and it feels like too much and they don't even know where to start or what to prioritize. And so that's what we're here for. Tonight, you can instantly get access to the caregiver training course that we have available online. If you go to this website, now.moramaexperience.com/webinar, and Tyler's going to put that in the chat. So you can have instant access to that. And then additionally, we're starting next week. We're going to do the live coaching sessions where you get access to Tyler and myself and a group of supportive individuals who are going to join us. It's so wonderful when we see people make those connections, and it's phenomenal. It's so heartwarming to see the relationships that are formed over these 12 weeks. And we want to make sure that you feel really excited about this and that this is the right thing for you. So we offer a 30-day, no questions asked, money back guarantee. I want you to feel no risk whatsoever if you're considering this. This is going to be 12 weeks of coaching, 60-minute sessions with me guiding you, but there's so much value that you get from everyone else. We limit these classes to 12 people. And so there's not a ton of people in there, and we make sure that there can be time to all connect with each other. Liz had told us, I've been able to solve problems more creatively and calmly since I joined this group. So full transformations in how we feel about taking things on in life. Kathy said, I was so overwhelmed with all of the new knowledge from Dr. Bredesen, and your class has helped us get on track. My dad went to a biological dentist and it saved his life thanks to your recommendation. I don't know what we would have done without this class. Leslie said, the books are dense. And although I love Dr. Bredesen's books and appreciate them, the class breaks it down into bite-sized pieces week after week. So I can start the parts I'm able to with more specifics geared towards my husband and I. And I love hearing other people's experiences as well. So we love hearing your experiences and we love creating this community. It's so much fun. And I didn't think that we would still be doing these a year ago. I thought that we would kind of put it out there and see how people responded and see how we liked it and see how stressful it was. And it's actually been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And so that's why we're continuing to offer them. I do have, my book is coming out in June. And so we don't know if we're going to continue to do it long-term, but there's a private Facebook group so that if you have questions that come up and you'll be part of this forever, there's going to be a group of other people who are doing the Bredesen approach. They're already in there. And sometimes, it's midnight and I'm at home and I'm thinking about some question I have for my colleagues or my mentor. And I put it in the Facebook group and I get often an instant reply from somebody else who is another naturopathic doctor, another person in this space. And it's so nice to have that community. And that's what I wanted to create for everyone in this community and the caregiver community or who's trying to implement themselves, the Bredesen approach. The other thing that we have is one-on-one time with Tyler. So Tyler has been doing this with me for many, many, many sessions. I think we're on session 9 now. And thank goodness, I don't know what I would do without her. But Tyler is phenomenal. She is a health coach and she knows the Bredesen approach inside and out. And so you get one-on-one calls with Tyler. She's going to help you get set up for an onboarding call. And then if there's also those things that come up that maybe you don't want to share in a group setting, or where you feel like this is really specific to me and my situation, and I want to pick her brain about how to optimize this for me specifically. And so that's what that call is for. And of course, Tyler always has access to me, so we can help make sure that you're being guided to get the most out of the Bredesen protocol. I've seen so many people get so much better, and I want you to have access to that. And tonight we're doing something really, really special for the next 24 hours only. We are giving away the basic protocol, the supplement protocol, so that you can get started right away and feeling better. So we often talk about supplements for brain health, and people want to know what did you start everybody in the trial on? These are the 5 things that I put everyone on who came in who was part of our trial. So they all started with OptiMag Neuro, which is magnesium 3 and 8. We made sure that they were on vitamin D3, and we use Zymogen products. I think they're very high quality. And so from Zymogen, we have the OptiMag Neuro, the magnesium 3 and 8 that goes into the brain and helps with many, many things, but neurotransmitters and relaxing and getting good night's sleep, vitamin D3, and Qualia Mind. Qualia Mind was put together by a friend of mine. It's a very sophisticated nootropic formula, so it helps with neurotransmitter synthesis, particularly acetylcholine and dopamine, but it also helps to support synaptogenesis, those connections that Einstein had between neurons, and neurogenesis, so the development of new neurons. And then Monopure is an omega, and ProBiomax is a probiotic that we're throwing in for the next 24 hours only. So if you're ready to get started, make a choice right now, make the decision and jump in with us. We can't wait to have you. And these will be on their way to, you just confirm your shipping address with Tyler and they will be on their way to you. And then the most important thing I think that we all get out of the Morama at Home course is the community. It is just a priceless community. And it keeps building. We invite you back. So once you're in the community, you can come to these coaching calls in the future. So it's not a one and done. If you miss one, you don't have to worry. They're all recorded. You can see your group, you can see your cohort and those calls, but you can also come back. If you say miss week 5, you can come back in the future when Tyler or I are leading these classes. So you get the Morama at Home coaching course. You get the coaching with me weekly for an hour. We often go 90 minutes, so make sure your schedule is cleared for at least 90 minutes. You get the private Facebook group access. You get one-on-one coaching calls. And for 24 hours only, we're throwing in those brain supplements that we're going to ship to you as soon as you confirm your address. And so jump in now because these are filling up very fast. We've already filled one class, and so we opened up a second, and we're so excited to be starting them next week. I have already started getting into ketosis because I'm preparing and I love how it feels. So that we can I'm just excited to be doing it. I was jumping the gun basically because I'm so pumped about starting this next class. So right now, we're offering this for $24.97, or you can break it up into payments. That is fine too. We want to make this as accessible as possible. So we're running this special. This is available right now if you want to jump in. We will sell out, and then you can sign up for the next one. We'll probably do another round in April after we finish these 2 courses. And there's a money back guarantee, and I want this to be completely risk-free for you. So thank you so much. If you can relate to some of the people who have joined us in the past, who have felt overwhelmed, who have felt like they don't know where to start, who get intellectually that Dr. Bredesen's approach is amazing and will work for them, but they don't feel like they have all the support or all the tools to actually implement it. That's what we're here to do. We want to get you the support you need to implement so that you can get the absolute most out of Dr. Bredesen's protocol, the way I've seen so many of my patients and so many of our coaching clients do. If you are like Amy and you want to feel less irritated, then please join us. She said, I've been less irritated since taking this course. Our days are so much more pleasant. She cares for her mom, and my mom is getting better. She's more alert and remembering the conversations with loved ones. It's so rewarding. Bruce joined us and he said, I'm getting so much out of the course. I've made significant changes. Just changing my breakfast and adding MCT oil has given me better energy. My mental sharpness is better, and I didn't expect it. My peripheral vision is better. So some even unexpected changes. Okay, so that's what's going on. We'd love to have you there. I also want to make sure that we are answering your questions. So I'm going to dive into the Q&A. And let me just find it. Okay, there's just a few questions there. So where can we get a sample of the MoCA score? So Elizabeth, great question. The MoCA is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and you can actually just Google it, and there's a PDF. Now, you can't give it to yourself. You need someone else to administer it. And so going to your primary care provider, you could ask them there if they can do a MOCA for you. Or there's also the SLUMS test or the many mental status exam. Those are both alternative cognitive tests that are on a 30-point scale that would be just as effective and help you to kind of put a number on where your cognition is or that of your loved one. Hopefully that helps. If you have a healthcare provider or even a nurse or a health coach in your family, it's really simple and easy to do the MOCA training so that you're trained to administer it. And then you could have someone in your family or in your network do that for you. Will the webinar be recorded? Yes, the webinar will be recorded. And since you're signed up for this, you will get an email with the link to the recording so that you can watch all of it. From Daryl, I'm 70 years old and I have ApoE34. I also have a cardiac calcium score of 800. I've heard that keto is bad for my heart. How should I do keto? So Daryl, this is a great question for a health coach. So the cardiac calcium score can be concerning, particularly if you have a family history of heart disease. Now you can do keto, like an Atkins keto, that's bacon and cheese, and that is not healthy. The type of keto that we're talking about is keto that includes lots and lots of veggies, the brassica family veggies like kale and broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and green beans and cabbages and green beans are not brassica family, they're legumes, but you know what I mean? All the green, good, yummy veggies that are highly nutrient dense. A little bit of blueberries. We do flax seeds and chia seeds and all kinds of amazing, yummy hemp hearts and lots of really good nutrient dense foods. So that you can do, that can be good. What's good for your brain is good for your heart. So we're not talking about a diet that's bad for your heart. I know that sometimes people get confused because we're increasing dietary fats, but those actually can be protective. And so with your cardiac calcium score, you would want to be testing, working with a provider directly to make sure that those things were true for you, right? That you weren't metabolizing things poorly. So from Guy, Apollo has a brain health program. What do I think of that? So Apollo has their recode and pre-code programs. And those are subscription programs. They're about 70, I know the recode is $75 a month. And you have access to basically their library of information, lots of recipes, lots of information, and then you can get a recode report. You need to get labs done either through your provider or you can pay additional through them and have them order the labs for you. And then you get a report. And what many people have told us is that they struggle to be able to implement it or understand it. It's a lot of information. Those reports are about 56 pages, I think, last I looked. And so you want someone, often people, hey, I have had people that have read the book, they come in with the Bredesen book and they're like, this made me so much better. I just did what he said and I got better. If you don't need hand-holding, then that actually can be a really great opportunity. If you feel like you've known about this for a while, but you've struggled to actually implement it, or maybe you've done some of the pieces, but you're not getting the results that you were hoping for or expecting, that's why we offer this, is because we hear from a lot of people that this feels overwhelming and like too much to do without more support. So that's why we have the community, we get together and we go through these pieces. I know that through Apollo, they have like a deep dive into detox that they have health coaches run. And so they do pieces of it, but we go through each of the different sections. So like we go through environment, we go through detoxification, we go through how to partner with your doctor. We go through the diet, of course. We tend to spend a lot of time on diet. We go through more of the activities, more of the exercises, sleep routines, morning routines. We try to, each of the 12 weeks, we have a different component that we talk through, and that gives you a week to implement, get feedback, figure out what's working, what isn't, come back to the group and get more inspiration. And so that's the idea and how it's a little bit different from Apollo. Is the Morama at Home course for caregivers and patients? And does the fee cover both parties or is it per person? It's for both. So yeah, absolutely, Jane. We often have families or a care dyads, we sometimes call them, the care partner, the patient, the person with dementia plus their spouse or their adult child. Yeah, they often will join us together. That's ideal, really, is that both people are committed and excited to show up together. So that's what we're looking for. Would it, Daryl, excuse me, would C8 MCT be okay? So I think, Daryl, what you would want to do is work with a provider who is your doctor, because there's so many components of that. With 3-4, you want to be careful with those medium chain triglycerides and your coconut, any of your saturated fats. That may put you at risk depending on, we've had some patients with 3-4 and 4-4 who've done okay with coconut oil, but we really, really closely track their advanced cardiometabolic markers. And so it's not being your provider, I can't say one way or another. All right, are there any other questions before we sign off here? I'm so grateful to all of you for your engagement. It's just such a privilege, and it's so inspiring to have you show up on short notice. We just decided to do this last week because we'd talked about keto a couple times, but not about activities. And I felt like it was a missing component that I wanted to share with the community. And it really is so wonderful to be here with you all. It's such a privilege, and I wish you all, I think I see more coming up in the chat, but are there any? With the 12-week course, do you get a diet routine? We talk through, yes, we absolutely talk through diet. So, and there's a keto diet guide that Tyler just put in there. Are there any contraindications for LiveO2? Karen, reach out to them and chat with them. Typically, no, you need to go slow. Sometimes people have a pacemaker, their cardiologist doesn't want them to do it, but typically you can. All right, it's so wonderful being with you guys. Please be well. It's such a privilege, and I wish you all health and peace in this new year. And if you're joining us for the Morama at Home Plus course, we can't wait to see you there. Thanks all. Good night.